Well, hello. I am Esquire Codex. I am going to play more 99 levels to hell. I decided that that's what I want to do. So that's what I'm gonna do. And I hope you guys haven't gotten sick of it, but I have two more things to talk about my Washington biography. First up, the issue of slavery with George Washington. This was almost hilarious throughout reading it. George Washington's entire indecisiveness and just not knowing what to do about his slaves. So he owned Mount Vernon as well as 5 other farms. Mount Vernon actually wasn't even the largest. And so this is a big estate, and he had many slaves, around 200, though that continually grew because one thing he had a firm stance on was never splitting up families, like selling part of the family away. And so he had many families on his farm, which hence led to much growth in his slaves as they had kids. And so he actually complains of this because he started with like 150 slaves, and by the end he had like 300. And he's like, I have too many slaves. They're costing me too much money. I have to feed on these people. But he stayed strong on his refusal to sell slave families. But anyway, so he had quite a few slaves, and he never liked the system of slavery. He always had a problem with it, but he didn't know what to do, because if he got rid of his slaves, how is he going to make money? How is he going to grow his crops? He'll have no one to do that. He can't afford to hire labor, can he? He's already struggling to make money when he has slaves, when he has free labor. So how can he hire labor and still make a profit? So even though he disliked the institution, he didn't get rid of his slaves, because he's like, well, I can't subsist without my slaves. And it's funny, his indecision continually came up. So many letters, like he would write to Lafayette. Lafayette was a huge anti-proponent to slavery, and he often urged George Washington to get rid of his slaves. And George Washington one day was like, yes, I agree, I will get rid of my slaves. But he didn't, because he just didn't know what to do. Ah, shucks. Restart. So he was vocally against slaves, but he never actually really did anything about that. While he was president, he did not vocally support acts to remove slavery. Once these Quakers came up with a petition that got to Congress to sign a law abolishing slavery, but Washington didn't want to support it and didn't really want it to pass, because the country was already so fragile that such a touchy subject as slavery, if that got instituted, that a law on that got instituted and henceforth abolish slavery, that would probably rip asunder the newly founded nation. So his political stance on slavery was silence, pretty much. His moral stance was against. His financial stance was quite ambivalent. No, that's the wrong word. Quite unknown by him, as he financially didn't know what the causes would happen. But anyway, so throughout his whole life, he was super indecisive. Another example is he, at one point, said, I promise to never buy a slave again. And then about a year later, one of his slaves ran away, and he was in a letter he wrote to his friends like, I don't know what to do. I said to never buy another slave, but now I'm without a cook. What can I do? And so he bought a slave. Wow, I died quick on this one. You know, quite an oath there, Washington. That lasted a whole year. Good commitment. It is worth noting that he was a good treater of slaves. He was a very kind master. He would personally attend to them if they were extra sick, or he always provided them with food. But yet still, slaves want to run away. And why? Because a person wants their freedom. No matter how well they're treated, they don't want to live in bondage all their life and be answerable to someone above them. They want to be answerable to themselves. Someone above them, a man above them, I should say. But he did treat his slaves well. That is worth noting. And a kudos to him. In his will, he noted that the slaves shall be free upon his death. So even though he could not muster the courage... Okay, I didn't want to do this. Tripping LSD here. Even though he couldn't sum up the courage to release the slaves and go into the unknown while he yet lived, he did upon his death free his slaves. Which, funny on that, he put in the clause upon both his death and Martha's death because he didn't want to leave her in financial peril either. But funny upon that, after his death, Martha lived for a few more years, and within the year after the death of Washington, the slaves had heard about the will where they were free upon his death, or upon Martha's death, and Martha started getting afraid that the slaves were gonna try and kill her. And in fact, the barn at Mount Vernon was set fire to from arson, and a slave was a culprit. And when Martha figured out that, she was like, yep, no more, and she freed all the slaves before her death. Which, double kudos to Martha. She had the courage Washington did not, to free the slaves and see what would happen if she could subsist financially without it. Though, of course, it was under threat to her body that caused her to do so. But anyways, that is something that none of the other founders did up to James Madison, the fifth president the presidents didn't do. They all owned slaves, but none of them released their slaves, though many were vocally against slavery. None released their slaves upon living, as Washington, and none did in death either. So I guess good for Washington there, though could have done it sooner. The second thing on the Washington biography I have to say is about Alexander Hamilton, which, man, this just give me a kick. Hamilton writes like a fiend. That man could write so many words. Like, Washington would ask his opinion on a matter, and the next day, like, a 10,000 word document would just show up on his desk. Like, Washington was like, something came up on how much power Washington has as a president, and he wanted to ask Hamilton's opinion on whether he should be able to do this certain act as president, or it was overstepping his bounds. And he just simply sent him a letter. He's like, I just want your opinion on that. And the next day, Washington received a 10,000 word letter back from Hamilton, very detailing what he could and could not do in this instance. And that's just one of the many times that Hamilton just wrote massive documents. He wrote a 175-page refutal to some assertions against him in the press. There's so many times that Hamilton just spewed out this 10,000, 15,000 word document just within hours. The man could write. I struggle writing 500 words. Yet he does 20 times that, just like that. So I thought that was funny. It's also interesting how close Hamilton and Washington were. I didn't realize it, but they very much, at least politically, Washington was constantly asking for advice from Hamilton. But that will be the last I talk of Washington. So I say again. I'm reading Ulysses right now. I'm about halfway through, and man, that's a tough book. I'm reading it with a friend, and it's a good thing I have that pushing me, because otherwise I might drop it. I probably wouldn't. I don't like dropping books, but I might drop it. It's tough. It's just one long stream of consciousness, and it reads like a person's thoughts reads, in that it is extremely random, and even more so I feel like than a real brain, but you just jump from one thought to the next. There's no like a description by the author of why we're going from this thought to this thought. Just it's almost as if someone's walking down the street and they see something, their brain thinks to that. They don't logically say, oh, I just saw this sign, so now I am thinking of McDonald's. No, it's, oh, look at those roses. Ooh, a McDouble. Ooh, look at that. And so the book kind of goes like that. It's hard to keep track of. It's hard to follow. And on top of it, there's another thing that I can't really nail down, but just makes it confusing beyond just a continuous stream of consciousness. It's, I don't know. It's just because no event is really described. It's just kind of written as it's happening, and like you have to buy the thoughts that the character is having, or that the words that the characters are speaking, you have to ascertain where they are, what they're doing, what's happening, kind of like that. And it's also tough. James Joyce does not put in quotations, and he does these little indentations, but not always when someone is speaking, so that makes it tough as well. Oh boy. Bother. So I'm gonna keep plucking away on that. Tough one, tough book, but the last 50 pages I really am not sure what has happened. Hopefully I will soon learn, because I want to know what I'm reading. I feel like that's a understandable desire. But anyways, thank you guys for listening. Ciao.